Akon was undeniably one of the biggest hitmakers of the 2000s, with a voice so unique you could recognize it instantly. He was even called the voice of Africa by many, but over time it feels like all that respect and admiration has faded away. From getting caught lying about how he did time in jail, to literally scamming billions from an entire country.
You know, there's different information about how long you were in prison and everything else like that.
Yeah, I recall, reading the Smoking Gun article as well.
Who's that?
Smoking Gun could have just called me directly. I would have given him all the answers they needed. The question was, did I do 3 years in jail? Yes, I did 3 years. I just didn't do 3 straight years.
As well as being involved in really questionable acts with young ones.
Controversy over R&B artist Akon. Last month in a performance in Trinidad, he simulated on stage with a girl, a minister's daughter.
The judge ordered him to appear today, and this was his second court appearance.
Akon has really faced so many controversies. It is no wonder some people have even flipped his name to Akon. We've got so much to tell about this guy. Take his backstory, for instance. Akon often claimed he drew inspiration from his numerous run-ins with the law, portraying himself as someone who spent years in and out of jail.
After I got out of prison, I ended up doing 3 years for being a ringleader of a notorious car theft operation. Came out, couldn't get a regular job. I don't think I could really fall back on is my music.
But it turns out he made most of that up as a marketing stunt to stay relevant. He even admitted to fabricating parts of it when confronted.
It was the perfect marketing plan for me. Everybody thought, man, he did 3 years. I was like, yeah, I did 3 years. But I never told nobody how I did them 3 years. It was all a part of the strategy also to make my image believable too at the same time.
Then there's the infamous $6 billion Akon City project in Africa, which he said would be a futuristic hub resembling a mix of Dubai and Wakanda. I mean, just take a look at this. But years later, there's been no progress, no updates, just silence. Recently, he admitted he should have had more groundwork done before promoting it, but a lot of people aren't buying it and are calling it a scam.
I think the one thing that I would have changed was I would have gotten more things in place before promoting it.
And let's not forget his cryptocurrency, Akon. He boldly claimed it was already being used in places like Kenya, but locals have said they've never even heard of it.
Was Akon out right now?
It's active in Africa as we speak.
Okay, in what countries?
In Kenya.
Huh.
And right now we got a test going on in Uganda. So it's only in East Africa at the moment.
Add to that other controversies like accusations of inappropriate behavior with fans, and the list just keeps growing.
The controversy over R&B artist Akon. Last month in a performance in Trinidad, he simulated on stage with a girl, a minister's daughter. Now,
there's so much to unpack, so let's dive into it. On April 13th, 2004, Akon released his debut single, Locked Up, a gritty jailhouse anthem that he claimed was inspired by his 3-year stint behind bars. According to him, his time in the slammer gave him the space to reflect on his life, escape his streetways, and start focusing on making music that could lead to a better future. Akon also claimed that he actually wrote Locked Up while he was incarcerated and that it became a favorite among his fellow inmates and even the guards.
I wrote about being locked up while I was locked up. And I would sing it out loud to the point where the whole pod would sing it every time the guard would walk past. I'm locked up, they won't let me out.
When he got out, he said he had a plan. Armed with his certified street hit and a 10-year roadmap he crafted in jail, Akon decided to turn his life around and get rich legally. He built his entire career around this narrative, branding himself as the convict turned superstar. His record label was called Convict Music. His second album was titled Convicted, and even his name, Akon, was supposedly short for a convict. The theme of being locked up was everywhere in his music and persona, making it clear that his street-to-success story was the foundation of his rise to fame. Locked Up became a massive hit. It climbed to number 8 on the Billboard charts in the US and cracked the top 20 internationally in countries like France, Germany, Spain, and Switzerland. It helped push his debut album Trouble to number 18 on the Billboard 200. The album also featured another smash hit, Lonely, and cemented Akon as a breakout star. For a lot of people, Locked Up became an anthem. a street hymn for those who'd done wrong, been locked up, and wanted to turn over a new leaf. The track resonated with lawbreakers, ex-cons, and anyone with a rough past trying to change their ways. Thanks to the success of Locked Up, Akon became the go-to poster boy for rappers who had supposedly been to prison and used their time there as a springboard for something better. Interviews came pouring in, and Akon was more than happy to talk about his time in the slammer, reminiscing about his past life with anyone willing to listen. It added to his mystique and gave him a relatable edge. He wasn't just singing about the streets, he had lived it, or so he claimed. But as more people started to pay attention to Akon's story, one question kept coming up. What exactly did Akon do to get locked up? According to him, he wasn't just a small-time criminal, he was the leader of a notorious car theft ring.
After I got out of prison, I ended up doing 3 years for being a ringleader of a notorious car theft operation. Came out, couldn't get a regular job. I don't think I could really fall back on was my music.
In a VH1 interview, he bragged about literally snatching cars off the street. And not just any cars. His crew specialized in high-end luxury vehicles like Porsches, Lamborghinis, and Mercedes-Benzes. They would allegedly sell the stolen cars to celebrities and drug dealers. Akon even claimed he had been involved in high-speed chases with the cops, living a real-life version of Need for Speed Most Wanted.
What I was going through when I was stealing cars and all the police chases and all that, I can definitely say I was in that state of mind of get rich or die trying.
Of course, Akon's story also had its dramatic climax. He said that in 1999, while trying to steal a car, he was caught by police because he was driving a slow BMW 325, which couldn't outrun the cops. According to him, this incident led to his arrest, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison, serving time from 1999 to 2001. He often described this as his wake-up call, the moment that made him leave his criminal past behind and pursue music full-time. For years, this backstory helped shape Akon's image. Fans believed it. The media ran with it. His success seemed tied to this idea that he had come out of prison, turned his life around, and made it big. But then, in 2008, everything started to unravel. A muckraking website, The Smoking Gun, launched an investigation into Akon's criminal past, and what they uncovered didn't match up with his claims. First off, it turned out Akon had never actually served a 3-year sentence. The infamous incident with the BMW, the charges were dropped, and he didn't even get a conviction. In fact, there was no record of him serving any significant jail time at all. If you've followed Akon's career closely, you might remember the infamous 2008 incident where he ended up in hot water for tossing a teenage fan off the stage during a performance. It was a moment straight out of Duet. Akon literally picked up the kid and threw him off the stage, which, unsurprisingly, landed him in legal trouble. He was charged with harassment and endangering the welfare of a child. However, he got off relatively easy, paying just $350 fine and completing 65 hours of community service. But here's where things got a little suspicious. Despite his so-called notorious criminal past, remember, this was the guy who claimed to have spent years locked up as a car theft kingpin. Akon was quickly released without bail. That detail didn't sit right with some people, and it prompted them to take a closer look at his supposed history as the real-life CJ from Grand Theft Auto. In April 2008, The Smoking Gun published a bombshell 900-word investigation into Akon's criminal claims. Their conclusion? Akon's tales of a life of crime and hard time were, in their words, exaggerated, embellished, or wholly fabricated. They even joked that the con in Akon's name should stand for contrived. The article didn't stop there. It laid out receipts in the form of over 16 court documents that poked some serious holes in Akon's carefully crafted backstory. So what exactly was Akon lying about? Well, first, let's be clear. Akon isn't squeaky clean. His rap sheet does show about half a dozen arrests over the years, but here's the kicker. He's only ever been convicted of one crime. Now remember that grand tale Akon told in interviews about being the ringleader of a professional car theft operation? Turns out, that story was a little inflated. What really happened was that Akon got caught driving a stolen BMW a couple of times. In one instance in Atlanta, he was pulled over in a stolen 7 Series. When cops asked for paperwork, Akon tried to pass off forged documents to prove he owned the car. The police saw through the ruse and charged him with possession of stolen property, forgery, and driving with an altered vehicle identification number. Here's where it gets interesting. Akon was booked into DeKalb County Jail and held on a $20,000 bond bond, a sum he couldn't afford at the time, so he ended up spending at least 5 months in jail waiting for an indictment that, weirdly enough, never came. In late 1999, the case was dropped entirely, and Akon walked free. But why was the case dismissed? Well, it turns out the BMW Akon was caught with had been stolen 3 months earlier. Here's the wild part. The car's owner was a wealthy financier who happened to collect rare vintage guitars. One of those guitars, worth between $100,000 and $250,000, was in the car when it was stolen. Fortunately, before the car made its way to Akon's so-called chop shop, whoever originally stole it tossed the guitar onto the side of the road where it was later recovered. Both the car and the guitar were eventually returned to their rightful owner. And as for Akon, he walked away a free man with no consequences for driving the stolen BMW. Before and after that case in Atlanta, Akon had a few more run-ins with the law, specifically involving stolen BMWs. Back in New Jersey, Akon and one of his buddies were indicted in September 1998 for handgun possession and receiving stolen property. This case was tied to the same stolen BMW 325 that Akon had mentioned in his past interviews. The same car he claimed was part of his big car theft operation. Eventually, in June 1999, after spending 5 months in jail waiting for charges in the Atlanta case to be dropped, Akon struck a plea deal with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to the gun charge in exchange for having the stolen car charges dropped. As part of the agreement, Akon was transferred back to Georgia, where he served 3 years of probation instead of being locked up. That gun charge, well, it's the only felony conviction on Akon's record, despite the 6 arrests he racked up over a 3-year period. That's according to The Smoking Gun, whose expose painted a pretty clear picture of Akon's real legal history. But let's be honest, they definitely seemed to have it out for him. They went as far as tracking down old cops who had worked on Akon's cases. Those cops apparently weren't buying Akon's claims of being a car theft kingpin either. They described him as an arrogant SOB, whose main involvement in crime seemed to be his desire to drive flashy, high-dollar cars. Regardless of the Smoking Gun's motives, the facts were hard to deny. Court documents showed that Akon's probation ended in late 2001, marking the end of his 3-year probation period from 1999 to 2001, the exact time frame he claimed he was locked up in prison. This revelation seriously hurt his street credibility. After all, Akon had built his career on his image as a convict who had turned his life around. With these explosive claims making headlines, Akon couldn't just stay silent. He eventually responded in an interview with Vlad TV, where he tried to set the record straight. He dismissed the Smoking Gun's article as clickbait and doubled down on his claim that he had been locked up, albeit for shorter periods. He explained that if you added up all the time he had spent in jail across different incidents, it totaled 3 years. It wasn't a direct rebuttal to the allegations, but it wasn't a full admission of guilt either.
You know, there's different information about how long you were in prison and everything else like that.
Yeah, I recall, reading the Smoking Gun article as well.
Exactly.
Smoking Gun could have just called me directly. I would have given him all the answers they needed.
Akon also addressed the controversy in a separate interview with MTV News, where his response was more evasive. He downplayed the importance of revisiting his past, saying that everyone was entitled to their opinions but that he was focused on moving forward. He argued that his convict movement wasn't about glorifying his past, but about celebrating the positive changes he had made in his life through music. He suggested that dwelling on the negative aspects of his past served no purpose when he was working on building a brighter future. Now, say what you will about his response, it's clear that Akon exaggerated his criminal past, turning a 5-month jail stint and 3 years of probation into a story about serving 3 years in prison as a car theft ringleader is definitely a stretch. But here's the thing, it worked. At the time, hip-hop culture placed a lot of value on authenticity, particularly the kind that came with a tough, street-hardened persona. Akon's embellished story gave him an edge, helping him stand out in a crowded industry.
It was all a part of the strategy also to make my image believable too at the same time. Because at that time in hip hop, man, it was like you had to have some kind of track record.
It wasn't just about selling records. It was about creating a narrative that people could connect with. Whether or not his story was entirely true, it resonated with fans who saw him as someone who had overcome a rough past to achieve success. In a way, Akon's finessing was a form of survival. He didn't want to be a petty hustler or a guy caught up in low-level crime forever. By spinning his time in jail into a larger-than-life tale of redemption, he created opportunities for himself that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Today, Akon is a global superstar with platinum records, mansions, and luxury cars to his name. Sure, his rise to fame involved some embellishment, but can you really hate someone who used their hustle to escape a life of struggle? But hyping up his street credibility isn't the only reason people have been giving Akon the side-eye. In 2020, Akon made headlines with an ambitious announcement. He was building a $6 billion futuristic city in Senegal. He pitched it as a dazzling blend of Dubai and Wakanda, a high-tech African utopia. This was a bold step, coming off the back of his previous initiative, Lighting Africa, which had been successful in bringing solar-powered energy solutions to parts of the continent. According to Akon, his success with Lighting Africa helped him secure a $1 billion credit line that he claimed had grown to $5 billion with the help of Chinese investment groups. He wasted no time hitting the media circuit, promoting this grand vision of Akon City, a city that was supposed to be a game-changer not just for Senegal but for the entire continent. The proposed city was set to be built on a 3-square-mile plot of land about 60 miles from Dakar, Senegal's capital. Now, 3 square miles isn't enormous. It's roughly 2,000 acres, just a bit more than twice the size of Central Park in New York City. But Akon explained this was only phase 1 of a multi-phase plan to expand the city over time. What made Akon City unique wasn't just its design or scale, but its economy. Akon announced that the city would run entirely on its own cryptocurrency, Akon. The cryptocurrency was designed to address a major challenge in Africa. The continent's 54 countries each operate with their own currencies, many of which are highly volatile. Akon was pitched as a solution, a digital currency that would empower entrepreneurs, enable seamless transactions, and help connect African citizens to the global digital economy using just their mobile phones. Before the cryptocurrency officially launched, Akon's team offered a pre-sale opportunity called the Token of Appreciation (TOA) campaign. Donors who participated in this pre-sale were promised 4 Akon tokens for every $1 they contributed. When Akon finally launched on major crypto exchanges in early 2021, it started strong, peaking at around 58 cents per coin. This was a 132% gain for early donors, if they cashed out in time. But most supporters believed in Akon's vision and held on to their coins, confident the value would rise further. Unfortunately, the price of Akon quickly spiraled downward, plummeting to around 10 cents per coin. For those who had once seen significant gains, this sudden drop meant losing around 60% of their initial investment. In response to the backlash, the Akon team promised refunds to TOA donors. One donor, Marcus, shared that the refund process was supposed to take a few weeks, but years later, he and others were still waiting. Marcus wasn't alone in his frustration. A popular YouTuber who runs the channel Go Black 2 Africa also revealed email exchanges with Akon administrators.
He has this Akon, like a Bitcoin, that him and his team went out to do a project to be able to help and assist.
The YouTuber shared proof that he had reached out in December 2021 and was told by a representative, Andrew, that his refund request was being processed. But after providing his mailing address, he was ghosted for months. Now, 3 years later, he and many others have yet to see a dime of their money.
Of course, myself and other people have done such a thing, and they have failed to return people's money, which then will lead me to believe it would be a scam.
When asked about these unfulfilled refunds, Akon claimed he had no idea there were issues. However, it doesn't seem like Akon has stepped up to personally cover the losses or resolve the situation, adding insult to injury. Akon's value continued to plummet. At one point, it hit a dismal $0.0029, effectively making the currency worthless. As of now, Akon isn't listed on any major cryptocurrency exchanges, meaning it can't be bought, sold, or used for anything. In essence, it's as good as dead. But the problems didn't stop with Akon. Akon City itself has turned into a punchline. In 2022, a photo went viral showing a single concrete block sitting in an otherwise barren field where Akon City was supposed to be. This Minecraft block, as it was dubbed, became a symbol of the project's complete lack of progress. Keep in mind, Akon had initially promised that the city would be finished by 2024. Now, with only that one lonely brick to show for it, it's clear the project is nowhere near completion. When pressed about the delays, Akon blamed the COVID-19 pandemic, saying it had pushed everything back by 2 years.
Unfortunately, because of me promoting it before we got started, we never anticipated COVID, where everything would be pushed back 2 years.
However, this explanation doesn't hold up, considering he announced Akon City at the height of the pandemic, when logistical challenges were already well known. At this point, it's hard to ignore the mounting controversies surrounding Akon. While he remains an undeniable icon in the music industry, his recent ventures are overshadowing his legacy.